Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So this is a question and answer session, but there are usually some questions that keep coming up. So I put them together quickly here so we could run through some frequently asked questions. And if your question is not here, then you can ask quickly, right? So some of these I addressed before. That a woman who is in her menses, who is menstruating, can she perform ghusl on a deceased woman? And the answer is yes. There's no evidence to say that to prevent her from doing that. The state of menses is not some impurity that transfers to the deceased, right? So, so that's fine, right? Yes, she can bathe the deceased. If she herself doesn't feel comfortable doing that and she wants to withdraw and say, okay, let somebody else do it, that's fine. That's fine, right? It's her choice. I talked about this before. To untie the knots, yes. It is based on a hadith, but the hadith is disputable. But yet it is also narrated that Abdullah ibn Masud said that you should do it, right? But again, please do not say it is allowed to allow the deceased to sit up or to perform salah or anything like that. No, right? This way I talked about at length that can a non-Muslim perform ghusl and know that the majority of scholars say no, right? And I said that we as Muslims, we need to be firm. We could be respectful, but we need to be firm and say that Brother Azran had mentioned, he explains to the non-Muslim relatives that this is a sacred ritual. And you can use those kinds of words. It's a sacred rite, it's a sacred ritual that is to be performed by Muslims, right? Last week, somebody had asked this exact question. If the deceased skin or flesh is falling off, it's so delicate, like if they're in a fire, they got burnt, anything like that, then what can we do, right? In place of the normal ghusl, that, yeah, you do whatever is possible without harming the body. So you can just, put the water very gently and so on. You don't rub, because then the skin might come off and so on, right? But that is similar to what you do when you are alive. When you're alive and you have that kind of skin damage, you don't put water and rub, right? You just gently put some water and sometimes you just wipe and so on, right? When you have buried the person, is there a specific length of time that you should stand there and make dua, right? No, there's no defined length of time. Just make sincere dua for the deceased, however long that takes, right? And again, it's an individual dua, right? Not a communal dua. Right. Can we had addressed this. Can we pray janazah behind a Qadiani or Ahmadi Imam? And the answer is no. Right? That for the salah to be valid, the Imam has to be Sunni. I had mentioned this though. If you know that deceased person was Sunni, how did it end up in this situation? Maybe he has Ahmadi relatives and they brought their Ahmadi Imam. But you know that he himself was Sunni, then go home and pray janazah, right? Salatul Ghaib, the salah with the absence of the person, because as long as you know that person was Sunni, then it becomes compulsory on all of us that a janazah must be done, right? Okay. Can someone purchase and prepare the funeral, the burial clothes, meaning the shroud, while they are alive? Yes. Yeah, there's no harm in that, right? Yes. Yeah. Yes. You can do it on more than one person too. You can do it, right. So coming back to this, in fact, actually, let me pause and say this here. This has happened. I have had to perform janazah like this. Or it comes up later. Sorry, with Christian and I'll wait for them, right? Right. So can you purchase the shroud while you're alive? Yes. And in fact, the cost of the shroud is supposed to come from the wealth of the deceased, right? But if he doesn't have any wealth, if he's so poor, then someone can donate it to him, right? In some countries, that's the standard thing is that people like to give charity. So when you go to the funeral home, they already have everything. They have the shroud and everything, and you don't have to pay for anything, right? When people die in Hajj, that's it. You don't have to pay for anything. Everything people have donated, right? So what if, can someone specify that they should be buried in the ihram clothing which they use for Hajj. So they went to Hajj, they come back home, and they set aside the ihram clothing, and they tell people, look, bury me in that clothing. Yes, there's no harm in that, because the shroud is just cloth, right? And you can use the ihram for the what Brother Azran showed last week, that the lower part, the waistcloth, the longi, you use, remember, one part of the ihram, you can do that. And then the covering for the top, you use the other part for that. There's no problem with that, right? Do you get more blessing for doing that? Allah knows best. But yes, you can do it, right? Is the Janazah prayer valid if it is performed by only one person? Yes, because it is Fard Kifaya, right? Of course, it is always better to get a big Jama'ah, right? The Salah is valid if even one person performs it, right? Is wudu a requirement for the Janazah prayer? Yes. The Salatul Janazah has all the conditions that a regular Salah has. So you must have wudu, your clothes must be clean, you have to cover yourself. For women, that means the hijab, everything. The men, you have to cover from the navel to the knee, or better yet, more than that. You have to face the Qibla, the place must be clean, and the time must be the correct time, not the 3 forbidden times and so on, right? I had mentioned this when we talked about the waiting period. An old woman who is beyond the age of bearing children, does she still have to observe the iddah, the 4 months and 10 days? Yes. When Allah prescribed this, when you read the ayah of Quran, there's no distinction between old and young women. And it is, right, this ayah, there's no distinction between old and young women. And I had mentioned that it is to show respect for the deceased person, also for the benefit of the woman, that you give her some time, as we say in Trinidad, to catch yourself, so that she is not occupied with things of this world. She gets some time to herself, she gets to grieve on her own, right? And as I forgot to mention, right, when I had mentioned what Sheikh Said said, like in Ghana, that the woman actually stays inside all the time, but it is not a prison. The community comes out and helps her. They bring food for her. If she has children, they will arrange for somebody to take the children to school. All of these things they will help her with, right? What I forgot to mention is this, that I said we should revive this practice, but don't put all the burden on the woman herself, that she must lock herself up in the house for 4 months and 10 days. In the same way as Sheikh Said told her what goes on in Ghana, we similarly have to help, we have to come out as a community and help these women and the families as well, right? The families of the woman. You can help her, to do her groceries and all of that. So she doesn't have to come out all the time, even though it is permissible. But you help her as much as she can, right? As much as you can, so that she's not distracted by all these things. It's partly cultural, but partly Islamic as well, that you're trying to help her to observe that iddah as best as possible, right? But yes, the culture plays a part in it. They have this whole communal system that they have worked out over the centuries, and it works. And but yes, it's culture, but it's based on Islamic values. It may not be exactly the same here, but we should try to think along the same lines. What can we do to assist this woman, right? And to assist her to observe this period, this iddah, as best as she can, right? It was right. So again, the brothers ask, is it sunnah for the people to assist in general? It is always the sunnah to assist your Muslim brother or sister, right? But think about their community at that time and their society. A woman who's staying by herself like that, clearly she needs help. And even though it's not recorded like in specific hadiths and so on, clearly, logically, she must have had help from the society, right? And if we want to revive this sunnah, we have to understand the woman can, there are certain things she may need help with, right? Right. Can we pray the Janazah without a body? We talked about that many times. That's called Salatul Ghaib, the prayer for the deceased who is not present. Again, I want to remind, that should be done when it is necessary. When you know that the person has died and there was no Janazah performed. Uncle Robbie gave an example. Somebody dies in prison, and the prison authorities make no arrangement for the Janazah, and they bury them right there in the prison, right? In certain systems, in Trinidad now, because there are so many Muslims in prison, there may be, I don't know if there's any accommodation, but I know in other countries, and so they may just bury the person right there. So that's a situation, right? Again, it's not encouraged, where you know it is already known that a proper janazah was done, then there's no need to do it in your country. There's no need to do these repeated janazahs, right? And I had mentioned some of the negative things that can happen because of that you have competition and so, right? Yes, yeah. Well, there you have to. Yes, yeah. If somebody dies by drowning and you have not recovered the body and so on, then you have to do this janazah without the body. Is there a time frame? Last week we had after the class we had that discussion. There are different opinions among if somebody disappears and you can't find their body, and it can happen at sea. It can happen to the situation we had where it appeared to be a crime. It appeared to be that the person was kidnapped, but no trace was ever found of the person. The scholars have different opinions about how long do you wait before you declare the person dead. And I don't want to go into all the details, right? But Omar, at the time of Omar, they used 4 years. When you had no news of the person and so on, they used 4 years, right? Other scholars had different opinions about that, right? But in general, it's that sufficient time has passed that you are now convinced that this person has died. And then there are certain rulings that take place then that they inherit, the property can be divided, but also that a janazah has to take place, right? Do we pray the janazah for someone who committed suicide? Yes, I had mentioned this before. We pray the janazah for all Muslims, righteous and sinful. There's no exceptional circumstance. Suicide is indeed a major sin, and I talked about that it doesn't take the person out of Islam. And the hadith about the person being in the fire, khalidan mukhalladan, forever, that the scholars have said that is the threat that they're under. They are under that threat, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may remove that from them. They are still within the, so it doesn't make the person a disbeliever, right? Right. Now, here's what we had wanted to come back to. The non-Muslim relatives of a deceased Muslim have conducted a funeral for him under Christian, Hindu, whatever type of rites, or maybe no rites, and they just cremate his body, whatever. What do we do? In Trinidad and Tobago, according to the legal system, the certain relatives have the right to take the body from the funeral home or from the hospital or wherever. If we go and try to take that body, it will cause more problems. They will call the police. The Muslims will be arrested. Fighting can break out, all these kinds of things. You have to understand what you are capable of and what you are not capable of. It's a very sad situation, especially if it's your relative. I mean, you are related to the person too, but you are not the next of kin. You don't have the legal right to go and take, and it's a great trial that you know they're going to take away this body and do Christian rites or maybe cremate them or something. What do? You have to perform the Salatul Ghaib, perform the Janazah for the deceased who is not present, right? And again, it is compulsory to perform the Janazah for every deceased Muslim. I have had to do this more than once for deceased Muslims who the non-Muslim relatives took away the body and the Muslim relatives didn't have control over it. Again, this is why if you have non-Muslim relatives and you know, and also for the brothers who have reverted to Islam and they may be the only Muslim in their family, it is important that they arrange their legal affairs before they die. And I don't know how. You need to consult a lawyer or so, is it that they have to give power of attorney to somebody? I don't know. Yeah. Yes. Right. 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 So the Imam is asking that, can they, right, and I don't know. Is there some legal directive that he can lead? This needs to be investigated. What we need to do is talk to some Muslim lawyers and find out what can be done for these brothers or sisters who have accepted Islam and they have no Muslim relatives. What can they do to protect themselves and to ensure that they get a Muslim janazah when they have died, right? And that's something I think we need to follow up on to help them out, right? But for those of us who we have Muslim relatives, but our next of kin, our closest relatives may not be Muslim, and we are worried that after we die, they may take away our body. Please, while you are alive, you need to arrange this, right? And you need to talk to your non-Muslim relatives and make it clear to them what you want done after you die and so on, right? You need to, well, there's always that danger that they don't follow what you ask for, but you have to try your best while you are alive, right? Um, and then there's this question that if you miss the janazah, what can you do? That up to 1 month after, you can pray at the grave, right? So I had mentioned this before, that when you look at all these rituals, they revolve around certain themes, and I've gone through this before. That firm belief and acceptance and that trials are decreed by Allah, patience during times of calamity, supplicating sincerely to Allah. So these are not mere rituals that we just go through, well, because somebody there, well, we have to do these things. No, they have a higher purpose, right? They have a higher purpose, that these rituals are meant to teach us this acceptance of Allah's decree, this patience during times of calamity, that teaches that we need to focus on supplicating for the deceased, not for putting on a performance in the funeral for the living people. And I don't know if you all remember, there was a deceased person, and they made the body sit up on like a throne, or stand, yeah, on the back of a vehicle, and then they drive. That was like a performance, or like a show, and the star of the show is the deceased person. Very strange, right? No, we focus on what is of benefit to the deceased. Also, we focus on preserving the dignity of the deceased. Was that dignified? To do that, to drive somebody around, like, was that dignified? Yeah, right? And focusing on what is of benefit to the deceased, assisting the relatives of the deceased, and providing a dignified burial, and praying sincerely for every Muslim, sinful or righteous, right? That when you look at all these practices that we do, this what we should bear in mind, that there's a higher purpose, these higher purposes. I want you all to think, as Ramadan is coming up too, fasting is not just starvation and thirst. Fasting is also not waiting for that Maghrib Adhan so you could get nice samosa and pulori and all of that. Fasting has a higher purpose of achieving taqwa, and we should focus on these things, right? I had mentioned there's a program at Masjid al-Hadi next Saturday, and we'll be talking about these things. Similarly with the Salah. The Salah is not just movements and just saying things. There's a higher purpose, and when we did the Salah workshop, we talked about that. That you are remembering Allah, you are mentioning His names, you are supplicating Him for help, and so on. I want you to apply that thinking, and we don't have time because today is just Janaazah, but every act of worship we do in Islam, it is not just a mechanical ritual. It has a higher purpose. And think about what that higher purpose is. I try today to bring out some of that. There's some good books, and so you can read about it. When you go to Hajj, it is not just staying in a tent and moving here and there and going through a set of hardship. There's always some higher purpose, right? So apply that kind of thinking to all the rituals of Islam. So I want to open the floor for a question, but just quickly, I want to ask you all a question. Does everyone here who has not bathed somebody before, do you feel confident that you can assist in a bathing? Right? Like Brother Azran and Shyam, they will have professional people. But do you feel confident you can help in a bathing now? And for the sister, this is that you can help in a bathing. But do you feel confident you can pray a janazah by yourself? I mean, you might have to memorize the dua, but you feel confident, you know what to do. You know the sequence, right? And if you memorize the duas, that you can do it. Yes? Both women and men. For the men, do you feel confident you could lead the janazah? Yes? And I want you all to think about that. For your father, your grandfather, and so on. Who will be the person who will be the most sincere in their dua? For your father, for your grandfather, your grandmother, your mother, who is it? Is it some imam you bring from somewhere else, right? Right? Some person who you think is pious because he have big long beard and so on. No, it's you. It's you. It's your father. And that's why you should learn how to lead the janazah and be confident in it, right? And pray for your relative, right? So quickly now, any questions? Any last questions? Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Right. So the brother is asking, what about people who have drowned and so there's no grave for them? Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not put a burden on anyone more than they can bear. You are only responsible for what you can do. So the Muslim community, they cannot find that person, right? The body is lost, so they are not accountable for burying him or not burying him, right? But you have to still do the janazah, right? Also, he doesn't have a grave, but he is not accountable. He's not. I mean, every Muslim person, you cannot dig your own grave, right? But the point is that the Muslim community is not to be blamed when someone is like that, lost at sea, lost in the forest, lost in the desert, right? Salam. Salam. And you can't find the body, and there's no grave. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made you responsible for that, right? Just like, just as, for example, Hajj is a pillar of Islam. But someone who is very sick, very old, or may not have the money, right? He's not accountable for that. Hajj has been, the responsibility has been removed from him. Yes. So similarly, a person whose body is lost, the responsibility to bury him in a proper grave has now been removed from us because there's nothing you can do. That is from the unseen, and we leave that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we know that our du'as, that is what we know. That whether, listen, don't focus on this physical location of the grave. Even when you visit the graveyard, is it that you are going there to venerate the grave itself, the location of the grave? No. You are going there again to do what is of benefit to the deceased, which is to make dua for him or her. It's also what is of benefit to you, because it reminds you of death. It's a reminder of death. So even if there is no grave, you can still do that. You can bring benefit to the deceased by making dua, right? And we know our duas are heard by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether there's a grave or not, no, we continue to pray, right? Okay, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. But I was asking, if you're in a janazah and there are only like 10 people and so on, can you still make 3 lines? My understanding is yes, that you should line them up in 3 lines. And Allah knows best, right? All right. Any question? Yes. 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 Yeah. Three like that. Yes. That's um, uh, as I said, to the best of my understanding, you should try to form 3 lines. You should try to form 3 lines like, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right. Uh, at the grave? No. Hold on. So the brother is asking, can he has non-Muslim relatives, whether parents or not, or any relative and so, right? Um, yeah. Right. So the funeral prayer, the janazah itself is for Muslims only, but not only that, for duas, right? Any kind of dua for the person who died as a non-Muslim, no. Now I know that for especially brothers who have non-Muslim relatives, that is a great trial. It's very difficult to, that your non-Muslim relative are dying, you can't make dua for them, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet himself that it is not for him, no, you can't do it, to ask forgiveness for the mushrikin, those who died as non-Muslims, those who died as non-believers, right? Even if they were relatives. The Prophet ﷺ therefore could not make dua for his own uncle Abu Talib, right? Sorry. So, listen, our job is, if we have non-Muslim relatives, we do our best while they are alive. You give them da'wah, you try to invite them to Islam, and so on. You do your best. If they still die as non-Muslims, if you did your best and you were sincere in it and so on, you can account to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look, I did my best, right? But it is up, you have no control over what those people, whether they will choose to accept Islam or not. And that's one of the great trials of having non-Muslim relatives, right? I know, brother, it's very hard, but I mean, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed, right? For the deceased, specifically for the I know that in some communities they specify that time, that Friday after Juma, they specify the time. But let's talk about Friday first, right? The brothers asked about Friday after Juma. I don't know of any evidence specifying that time. I mean, you should go to the cemetery at whatever time and make dua for the people. Perhaps it is just out of convenience that we know we have a big gathering, so let's go after Juma. I don't know. But to say that there's any specific reward that is specifically encouraged at that time, I don't know of any evidence, and Allah knows best. Imam mentioned last night, which was the 15th of Sha'ban. Make it quick and summarize. All of the hadiths about the special nature of the 15th of Sha'ban and the special acts of worship that can be done on the 15th of Sha'ban, every single one of them is weak, except one. And I'll talk about that one, right? Every single one of those is weak. So making dua specifically, thinking that dua is more acceptable on that night. There are hadiths that maybe when we were growing up, we heard about this, that all of the people who will die in the following year, that it is decided on that night. That hadith is weak. That the risk, meaning how much you will earn and so on, is decided on that night. And your lifespan is decided on that night by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All that is weak. Fast, there's a hadith, what is it? Kumu laylaha sumu nahara. Fast during the night of the 15th of Sha'ban. Stand in the night of the 15th of Sha'ban and fast in the day, that is weak. Right? Reciting any particular ayat of Quran and so all of that is weak. There's hadith about reciting Surah Al-Ikhlas, but all of that is weak, right? And then to visit the graveyard and so on, I don't know where that comes from. That appears to be especially prevalent in the Indian subcontinent, but I don't know. I don't even know. I haven't seen even a weak hadith. Oh, right. There's the supposed hadith that the Prophet ﷺ went to Baqi on the 15th of Sha'ban. But again, all of that is weak. That Aisha saw that he wasn't there, and then and it was the 15th of Sha'ban. All of that is weak, right? So there's no evidence for any of that. There's one hadith that you can find in Sunan Ibn Majah and in other books, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at the creation on the 15th of Sha'ban and he forgives all of his servants except the mushahin and the mushrik. The mushahin is the one who has hatred in his heart for other Muslims, and the mushrik is the one who associates partners with Allah, right? That's the only hadith. Even that hadith, the majority of scholars say it is weak. Some scholars say that because there are many chains of narration, but each chain is weak, they say put it all together and they support one another and it becomes acceptable, right? That one hadith. But look at that one hadith. Does that one hadith tell you what to do on the 15th of Sha'ban? To go visit the graveyard, to do niyaj, to whatever, to gather in the masajid, anything like that? The point of that hadith is that you should not commit shirk, you should not be a mushrik, and you should not be a mushahin, meaning to have hatred in your heart for other Muslims. That's the point of the hadith. Not that there's some special activity that you do on the 15th of Sha'ban, right? So there's no evidence that it is a specially recommended time to go visit the graveyard. I know people do that, but no, right? Yeah. Yes. Yes. No. The authentic hadith said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven in the last third of the night in a manner that befits his majesty. How, we do ask. And he asks he says, who is asking for forgiveness so that I may forgive him, and so on. And that is every night. So I always tell people, you want to know what is the special night to ask Allah for forgiveness? It's tonight. And the next special night is tomorrow night. And the next special night is the night after that. It's every night. Now, of course, yes, Ramadan has its own special, and we know that the Prophet ﷺ used to wake up in the last 10 nights and so on. We know, yes, there are indeed special times, but there's no evidence that the 15th of Shaban is one of them. Right? All right. I spent too much time on Shaban. All right. Yes. All right. So can we end there? All right. We'll end there. We'll end there, right? Okay. So, Subhanakallahumma. Any? Oh, sister. Yes, yeah. Again, it's a weak hadith that you stand in the night in prayer and then you fast in the day. But that's a weak hadith, right? However, fasting in Shaban in general is good. Yes. Right, very good. In the month of Shaban, fasting is good. The Prophet ﷺ used to fast a lot in Shaban. So that's one. Also, every month, the 13, 14, 15, it is recommended to fast. The white days. The white day, 13, 14, 15, right? So yes, you can fast the 13, 14, 15 Shaban. The problem is that people think that the 15th of Shaban has some extra special characteristic that makes it more significant to fast. No, there's no authentic evidence for that. If you are fasting because it's the 13, 14, 15, that's fine. If you're fasting, as I said, because it's Shaban and in general, you should try to fast a lot in Shaban, then that's fine. But this idea that, yeah, on the 15th of Shaban, all these miraculous things happen and the lifespan is decided and all these things, and you're fasting because of that, no, there's no evidence for that. Right? Yes, yeah. But yeah, but anyway. All right, so let's end here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر هذا وصلى الله وسلم على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.